Gitu.
Selamat siang semuanya. Nah, selamat siang, selamat datang di ruang auditorium ini. Terima kasih untuk kehadirannya. Saya terima kasih pada Departemen Sosiologi, Ibu Lucia Rati, Sekretaris Departemen, dan Mas Fajri, Sekretaris Pasca, yang sudah berkenan hadir di dalam diskusi kuliah umum ini. Saya perkenalkan secara singkat dulu yang mungkin belum pernah bertemu dan belum mengenal beliau. Beberapa bulan lalu beliau sudah memberi kuliah umum pertama khusus untuk mahasiswa pasca terkait dengan topik sosiologi perkotaan. Hari ini kita akan mendengarkan bersama-sama dan sesudah itu tentu ada tanya jawab, diskusi. Topik yang akan dipresentasikan sebentar lagi adalah Transgressors to Democracy, Deniers, Populist, and Criminals. The new style of quote-unquote anti-establishment rulers and candidates. Mungkin kalau diterjemahkan secara bebas, saudara-saudari semua, pelanggar demokrasi. Para pelanggar demokrasi yaitu mereka yang menyangkal terhadap demokrasi, mereka yang mengklaim dirinya sebagai populis, dan kaum kriminal. Cukup keras ini judulnya ya. Jadi bagaimana gaya baru dari orang-orang yang mengklaim, makanya diberi tanda kutip, anti establishment itu anti penguasa. Padahal mereka sebenarnya ingin berkuasa. Itu yang sebabnya disebut dalam tanda kutip anti penguasa, para pemimpin dan para calon pemimpin. Prof. Arturo Alvarado nama beliau adalah Profesor Riset, Centro de Estudios Sociologicos, berarti pusat riset sosiologi di Colegio, Meksiko. Jadi beliau dan Ibu Yati cukup jauh datang dari Meksiko untuk kemari ke Indonesia untuk berbagai keperluan, dan kita berterima kasih bahwa beliau berkenan untuk memberikan kuliah umum ini. Waktunya 2 jam, saudara-saudari, dari jam 2 sampai jam 4, tetapi beliau mengatakan tadi akan presentasi sekitar 30 sampai 45 menit. Sesudah itu kita bisa tanya jawab bebas, diskusi. Begitu kira-kira sedikit pengantar dari saya. Beliau akan presentasi PPT dalam bahasa Inggris. Nanti kalau tanya jawab bisa selalu diskusi dalam bahasa Indonesia, bisa diterjemahkan. Terima kasih banyak, Prof. Arturo. Please, we welcome you and thank you for providing us with some very actual and relevant topic and materials to be discussed concerning democracy and politics. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bueno, selamat siang. Saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada pihak penyelenggara, Departement Sociology, Ibu Lucia Reati, Profesor Francisia dan para dosen yang telah memberi saya kesempatan untuk berpartisipasi dalam konferensi ini. Terima kasih. And the rest will be in English, okay? Now, I made a presentation for the meeting, and do you have it? Okay, today I call this, I put this title because, well, next slide, okay? Because what we want to do today, next, okay, we're going to discuss the overall problem of the state of democracy and elections in 2024 in several regions of the world. We're going to talk about several cases, several narrative speeches, and we're going to try to put a couple of explanation of the political behavior that we're looking at. You listen to me here? Okay, and then we discuss a couple of interpretations depending on the time and the consequences of the contemporary trend. Next. Okay. Well, the year has been a really active and frantic year in several countries and in several regions. As you know, to begin with the latest edition of the Trumpian politics, I mean, Trump finally won his second term in office, and this is going to be an important issue, not only for the United States, also for several regions of the world. But during this year, particularly, we have had several really contesting and interesting elections in several places, several countries and regions in our world. Argentina, which is one of the cases that we will discuss today in the Americas. Mexico, for sure, also had a presidential election, but also India had another, the third term of the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. And then Indonesia went to a very important election this year that you might be interested in discussing and talking about this today. I hope some of the issues and topics that come up will give you ideas of what is going on. And then you have several issues that has been happening in elections in Europe, in other places of the world, particularly, which you can see Hungary, the current topic of the, Prime Minister there. France went to an assembly election for the Prime Minister again, and had to form a new government particularly from an extreme right, even though the left won the majority of the vote. And the point in here, and the two questions that we're gonna try to address and give explanations to this thing is, after these massive and participative elections, because they were really participatory in all the places of the world, is the world more or less democratic today? This is the first simple question, okay? And the question that also, belongs to this discussion that is ongoing about the transgression to democracy is why some democracies have survived while others are running or falling into an autocratic type of regime, okay? Next. Okay, so what we have today, it's a broad leadership from not only from the typical, right and extreme right winning coalitions, but also from the left. And what you can see is that this emerging of this new type of leadership is coming up in several parts of the world with different ideologies and with confronting similar ideas, even though they either can come from a socialist or communist background or a leftist background or from an extreme right, as we can see. On the left side, you can see from the left, the Mexican president, the former president that just left the office, and his successor, Claudia Sheinbaum, that doesn't have the charisma that this guy has, but has the power and the apparatus and the narrative. And she's the new, writer of this narrative of the left, with policies that supposedly support the population and the people against the neoliberal currents, and with several other topics. We also have some other people from the from the left, like the Chilean president that is below there. And then you have some autocrats in that framework, which is, for instance, Maduro in Venezuela. But on the right side, you can see there are several other type of leaderships that if you compare the speeches and the narrative, they are the same. They are anti-establishment. They are trying to put a new system, implement new system, go and develop better policies for the people and try to develop their countries in a very different manner. For sure, is Milei, the new president of Argentina, that he calls himself not only an extreme right, he calls himself the leader of the narco-capitalist new world. And then on the other extreme, you have Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, as well as in the other part, I mean, for sure, you have Trump. Next. Okay, so what do we have today? I mean, we have a combination of speeches, narratives, hate speech, inflammatory and alternative propositions and alternative truths, that's what they said, that comes from all the political spectrum of the world today. It's not just, I mean, everybody tends to think that it's a particular narrative that comes from certain new leadership, but when you compare the narratives, they start to be very similar. Next. You know, for instance, the idea of the denial of the former 2020 election in the US by Trump has become an important political topic and one of these alternative truths that Republicans and their leaders, as well as their followers, are believe in those topics, no? But in the other play, in other economic topics, you can see that there have several other issues that are important to address in this area. For instance, Javier Milei is talking about that the social progress and the social policies of the former governments, particularly the Peronist long-term government of Argentina, was not more than a prison, you know, that this idea of a progressive society where nobody has to really work, where housing is free, where health issues are free, this is like a new prison and that cannot longer hold. But also, he goes into other topics and discuss, for instance, the role of women in politics, the role of women in the economics, and he's trying to build up not only a narrative, but also a doctrine of what type of economic policies should be developed in their countries. So you can see they have different approaches of the problem. Milei, as I was telling you, I mean, he declares himself the anarcho-capitalist leader of the new world, no? He goes against the status quo discussions on politics, on economics. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO, I mean, built up this idea that he was derogating of the neoliberal era and building up a new power against the neoliberal mafia that was ruling the country for more than 30 years, as well as Jair Bolsonaro on the other side, that he declares himself as a former leader and a former member of the military, that he was in favor of torture, no? That he wouldn't employ women and men with the same equal conditions, no? That he was against homosexuals, and he wouldn't do any of the policies that was developed before, okay? What do we have in other places of the world? We have, I mean, just to jump into other places, we have another example that is really important and interesting to understand the current global trends, Narendra Modi, no? Which, I mean, he was able to win his third term with a strong majority of the vote, but of course, he didn't win enough majority to control the parliament. So there is a little bit of an equilibrium there, you know, but he started his first term, he started cracking down on free press, undermining or try to undermine the independence of the judiciary and use various strategies, I mean, to win the elections, particularly gerrymandering using identity and regional politics, and even going against certain religious balances that his country had before. He used his personality and through his two terms, he built up this strong personality in order to try to survive on the one hand, and on the other hand, push this agenda. And on the other in other places like in Europe, in Eastern Europe, we have Viktor Orban, which if you develop and you see and analyze what he's been doing in the last 15 years approximately, he's been playing like what we can call the autocrat's playbook. What is this autocrat's playbook? I mean, first trying to twist the constitutional rules in order to maintain himself in power, but also to gain more power against the judiciary and to, erode the check and balances that constitution has. He promoted several liberal, non-democratic policies. He also cracked down on the media. He went against the universities and closed part of the university projects. And then he started following this trend that is important in Europe, but it's becoming a world trend in several regions of the world, of being an anti-immigration leader, an anti-feminist, and even, against, George Soros and all the economic leaders and rich barons that does not support their policies. And then, if you remember, during this year, actually, in England, there was a shift, a final shift in the balance of the parliament, where Boris Johnson and his party were ousted, and then the new Labour Party regained power. But he was also one of the leaders that follow and also took advantage of the new trends of the Brexit policy, where England, produced a turmoil in Europe in every single policy because they wanted to take advantage of this change. Okay. Okay. So what we have today, and this is part of the first idea and interpretation of the talk today, we have some sort of leadership and party movement that several scholars in the world talk about polarization, Polarization in two main ideas to begin with. Polarization as an electoral and a partisan fragmentation together with the same, and also the building up of differences and distances between different political, partisan, and ideological groups that I will develop later on. The second topic that you can see, and this is current in most of the analysis, is the emerging of this topic is that we have in several forms some sort of democratic backsliding. For instance, according to National Endowment for Democracy in the United States, authoritarian governments are escalating their efforts to manipulate the information ecosystem globally in order to undermine democratic institutions, advance their own interests and agendas, and buttress their autocratic allies. No? Next one. Okay. So we have several interpretations of what is happening both at the national level as well as some comparisons between regions. And what we're going to try to discuss today, overall bigger framework of how to compare these topics through the global trends, okay? For instance, if you go to the interpretation of what happened in Argentina with Milei, most of the scholars tend to think that the outcome and the changes in the electorate, together with particularly young men or males that were, threatened to lose all the gains during the last governments, as well as they were part of this new informal, trend of labor and informal trend of policies that the last governments were developing, went and voted for Milei because they did not benefit from the former long-term policies of the Peronism. But not only that, they also voted against all these trends on promotion of equal opportunities for men and women, equal opportunities for all people within their society. And they also try to mobilize the electorate in order to transform the economic and the government system. Close to Milei in Brazil, Bolsonaro also has interpreted and produced a mobilization of the conservative sectors of the country, not only the military, but also the business sector and several other small, political right-wing coalitions at both the federal and the local level, particularly, in order to build a new coalition and win in the first and only term that he has had. So there is an increase in right-wing electorate, okay, that is offering certain leaders and some parties in Latin America a new form of advantage and push to develop new programs as well as to push for new leaders and vote, and they tend to try to vote for them. No? All of them has a combination of what we call negative identities. Negative identities either on specific policies or against specific groups or against specific policy changes that the leaders has been developing. But what we see, and this is an issue that is not completely developed, but because it's not coherent, every single identity of each groups, what we have had in the last years, particularly in Latin America, is a coalition of anti-groups, anti-feminist, anti-gender, anti-abortion, anti-gay, anti-statu quo, etc., etc. Okay? So most of the interpretations try to either look at the local terms, but what we're going to see, as I was telling you, try to look at the broader agenda in the world. And for that, I'm going to propose you to go through 5 components on the analysis. The first one is what type of candidates and rulers do we have today? What is the profile of this new leadership? The second topic is what type of electorates and what is happening with the electorates, with the voter in these countries. The third topic is what is happening with political parties that have been like, the more important political institution to promote these policies or policy changes. What resources do they use, particularly money, media, information, and what type of diffusion they develop. And then we're going to see the consequences for this. Okay. So if we took, I'll summarize all what is happening during the last 2 to 3 years in elections in the world. We can see that they're in a scale of growing polarization between different groups. We can put like 2 poles at the end, where Trump will be like the most clear, non-democratic, populist, right-wing trend of leadership against people like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, which is one of these also very popular, but very policy-oriented, social policy, very progressive, leadership. That will be like the 2 different types of leadership that we have been, experiencing that is emerging in the world. No? So there is an increase in distance between what they call left and right-wing or extreme right-wing groups in several places in the world. For sure, sometimes they are not really right-wing completely, or they are not completely left-wing. If you can see, for instance, the discussion that Trump was having against Harris, he started talking to her about that she was a socialist, she was a communist, she was a Leninist. But none of the policies of Harris were actually coming from that. It was a social progressive at the best. But this, it was a game of blaming each other in order to try to put labels and to mobilize the electorate against or in favor of certain labels. Okay? So what is the backgrounds of all these politicians, and which is a context that is important to take into consideration during the last several years that we have had this shift among several leaders that comes from the status quo, that they don't develop that many policies and then they don't deliver what we were expecting, or this new type of leadership that is trying to change these trends, no? If we go to history and to particularly contemporary history, all the politicians in the world, all the world leaders, either Democrats or autocrats, have governed several of the worst human tragedies that we have lived during the last years. If you remember, for instance, one of the last, what is the most important global event that we just passed recently, and now we are happy that we have passed, and we are just almost forget? Which one is this one? It's the pandemic of COVID-19. We don't remember that now, but it was a real situation of global historical crisis. And we don't have this strong memory to really recover this idea, but all the world passed through this thing. And if you see and you analyze and evaluate all the policies that were implemented both at the local or national level, as well as the global level, most of those policies fail to protect the population. And those policies were developed either by progressive governments, as well as from right-wing and even irresponsible governments. Trump said that it was just a small flu. Bolsonaro said also that it was a small flu. But then you have this wave of infections and deaths that nobody really was able to process any health policy that will try to prevent the damage that the global pandemic produced in humanity in the last year. But also, in the last years, we have gone to several regional wars. And nobody is responsible for a particular war, and everybody tries to benefit from particular wars. The war in Ukraine, the war that is going on in the Middle East today, several wars in the region of Africa, several conflicts that are similar to wars in other places, criminal wars, etc., etc. No single government has been able to stop this and to promote different policies. And from this, we can go to several other issues in history, in the recent history, in both democratic and autocratic worlds, okay? So this is the background that we have to understand when we're discussing what kind of policies are good or are bad, and how crazy one candidate sounds when he promotes the negation of, for instance, of the COVID-19 pandemic, or that he promotes that the policies had to shift and reduce the taxes in order to produce progress for humanity. So this is the first issue. So the second that I want to point out is that most of them are irresponsible authorities. Not a single leader during the last, 15 to 20 years have been called, have been accountable to any form of judicial, social, political, or ideological, judgment after they have promoted these very crazy policies. So this is irresponsible policies, together with abusive power, together with corruption in several areas, and with strong impunity. So this is the status quo of what we are confronting. Either when we look at the right, we look at the left, we look at transgressors, we look at status quo leaders, we look at good and bad guys. But when we have an analysis of the policies that they are producing, we have a problem of trying to understand what is going on in the political world today. These leaders, together with the media and the changes that the media has had and have produced in the world, are one of the, this is the second factor that we have to take into consideration when we are talking about politics, about campaigning, about elections, and about these new narratives about what politics should be, and what the government, how should we develop governments. The third topic that we want to need and that we need to understand a little bit more is political parties. Several political party systems in different places of the world are in crisis and long-term crisis. I don't know the case of Indonesia, really. I haven't seen that much. You have a multi-party system that looks like works more or less, but then you can have a combination of right-wing politicians with very young, very progressive woke politicians, and then they produce coalitions that put together parties that will never mix in any blender that you have in your house, but it blends in the electorate and then produce political coalitions that you can see are very complex, no? But there is together with these three actors, leaders, the media, and the political parties, we are having increasing practices of disinformation and manipulation. And so part of this idea of the new trend of fake news, alternative truths, conspiracies, come from several areas of these three major actors, or three major players, no? Where they have this idealism as a mask. I'm going to promote change and I'm going to promote better policies for you, but they don't really deliver exactly what they were trying to promote. And in the other side, we also have an electorate that is either disappointed, this is disenfranchised, this is disenchanted by several of the policies that don't come out to be very good for them, okay? So what is really producing political polarization? We have several interpretations for that. I'm gonna go just to one, current interpretation for this thing, and try to explore how political, economic, and societal and cultural factors work with them. On the one hand, we have several individual or socio-psychological approaches to try to understand this type of new leadership that promotes polarization. Second, these have produced a new era of contenders against the status quo, against the right wing, or against the left, etc., that have been changing during the last years. And they have developed what I call, and what I have built up this idea of the political transgressor that includes this type of leadership that is either populist, that's either, anti-establishment, that is like the reality TV show leader, or even sometimes some sort of religious leaders. These deniers of what is happening in the world. And some others that are this type of religious redemptionists of the new society. No? They all promote one single policy, which is the destruction of what is working, of the status quo, because they consider that status quo has to be changed, no matter what, and there's no deep explanation of that, but that idea is a destructive policy. No? And then they play polarization in two different manners. On the one hand, they play them as a process using trends of the society that you can see that are ongoing, like recession, immigration policies, immigration threats, okay? And on the other hand, they also produce some practices, have created some practices from the leadership in order to promote certain types of polarization I will develop later on in this talk, okay? Okay, so if polarization could be understood as the growing distance between the median voter and the individual voter, which is one idea that I like just to point out in here that is important to understand this thing. The longer or the larger the distance between the median voter and the more polarized electorate are the issue today that is in continuous systematic competition to gain power. Politicians does no longer run, as we tended to think in political sociology and in political science, through the median voter. That means the place where most of the electorate concentrates and where the majority of the electorate can be won by trying to be or trying to join policies, interests, and projects with the median voter. Today, the game is very different to that one, okay? Still, they have to consider partisan preferences for sure. Certain policies are more keen in Republican parties or in Democratic parties in the United States, more in the left-wing parties than in the right-wing parties. But it is important to understand that they try to move not only to where they think, or we usually tend to think the majority of the vote is concentrated, but also take out and polarize these voters in order to take what is in the extreme region, on the extreme portions of this electorate, okay? So to do that, they had to promote different values and positions. They had to move emotions from the electorate, not only interests and policy preferences. They have to promote different type of topics and discussions that will move the electorate either not only from the center, but also try to polarize them among different issues that I will talk a little bit in the next one. Okay, but what is happening in this thing is we have seen in the electorate not only this polarization, but we have seen two other important topics that are consequences of these policies. On the one hand, more fragmentation of the electorate that is reflected in fragmentation of the vote that political parties are getting today. And also, we can see that there is a larger trend today in most of the countries of a larger group of independent voters, okay? So politicians does not only have to appeal to the rank and file in their parties or in the political and ideological coalition, they also have to go and try to catch these other groups that are either fragmented or are independent. And this issue was crucial to, and is crucial to understand Trump's victory in the last elections. Next one. Okay, so we have several types of polarization according to the topic that I'm talking. The first one is ideological. It's about topics. I'll talk a little bit about that now. The second one is affective. It's about identities. Where do I stand for? Where do I identify? Who do I identify with? Or to what topic do I identify more in one topic than against another? There is another type of geographical polarization that is also can be produced by ethnic differences. There is demographic polarization. Sometimes it's group polarization by age, by gender, by nationalities, also by ethnics. And there is economic polarization too, which is another topic that we can discuss later on. What is affective polarization, which is one of the new important topics that we need to understand when we try to see this type of new leadership approach into the electorate, okay? These people, there is more loyalty to, they still loyal to political parties and organizations, to leaders whom they identify, okay? But they also have become more hostile toward other parties or leaders where they don't identify. So this is the first part of the polarization that is important to understand. The second one is geographic and demographic. This polarization against people, for instance, in nationalist topics, sometimes in ethnic problems, sometimes in regional identities that has become important in several governments, like for instance, Europe is one of the cases that is important to do this thing. And then you have this triangle of interactive relations between the affective polarization, the ideological one, and the growing political distrust against institutions that this type of leadership and this type of partisan policies have promoted, which is one important issue. Next one. That is really important to understand. These policies have tended to produce an increasing trend or erosion in the trust in institutions. 25 years ago, you could see any single global study or global survey on identity and trust and and social policies, and people tend to be more tend to trust more institutions and certain policies. If you see the latest Gallup or the global value, survey, you can see that the trust in institution has systematically go very low and eroded the trust in institution, trust in people, trust in political parties, for instance, is one of the lowest in the last probably 50 years, okay? This is another way to measure this type of polarization. One is economic and the other is cultural. This study from Sophie Genderlow, tried to look at economic polarization in Europe just to compare that. And she found that only 2 countries in Europe had decreased the polarization in economic topics. And also only 3 countries have decreased the polarization in cultural topics. So this is an issue that is coming up at regional and at national entities in major portions of the world, like in Europe, okay? So we had to take into consideration these ones, okay? Now, there are several other topics that has to be, addressed when you talk about this new type of leadership. One is the personality feature of this leadership that is emerging. No? It's a combination of narcissist personalities. You can just see Trump, but also you can go to, whatever leadership you want to talk about. They are all very sure about what they are and what they think and what they. But on the other side, which is interesting, they have a systematic inability to fulfill their promises and their responsibilities, okay? Which is another important topic to understand. And it has come with with a dark side of this personality that I'll talk a little bit. They all have this type of polarizing attitudes, Trump talks about not only Kamala Harris as a socialist, but also as a woman that don't fulfill the responsibilities of a woman, Okay, or as part, she's not Black. All this discussion about identities and rebuilding and criticizing systematically every single opponent for that thing, And for sure, in economic ideas, you can see these topics are important. Okay. They have some political features that are interesting too, but this is a funny thing. We tended to think that all these people had no political experience and they were all freshmen in politics. But if you see these leaders like Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he's been a political leader for more than 40 years, but he was in the other side of the political spectrum. He was a priest, and now he built up his own party, and he has his own narrative, and he criticized the former political party. So it's not a freshman, but the idea of being the freshman, it's important. Is the emerging leader, Even Trump is not so much as a freshman now today, but still it's important to understand this idea that I am the new guy that I'm going to change the world, Milei, Bolsonaro, and then you can go on to several ones, okay? The other topic is important. They are media figures. Most of them have had experiences like reality TV shows, others religious, others in assemblies, etc. But they have developed their own mediatic personality, which is something important to understand of what type of leadership we are talking about today, okay? Then again, what I was talking before, the rejection of the status quo. They all promote to distrust the government. The government is lying to you. That's what everybody says. So don't talk and don't listen to the government. Don't believe in the government because they are lying to you. So the consequences are dramatic for that one. And on the other one, winning is everything for them. It's not a compromise politician. It's not a politics of compromise. It's a politics of winner takes all, and that's what we're going to have today, okay? And that's where we're looking, actually. Okay. There are several texts that we could go on into this idea, the neurobiologic composition of the personality. This idea of, this, which is important, the illusion of control, the sentiment that they are capable of developing and changing the world. Okay? Which is more an illusion than anything else, but it's an important illusion that they try to sell it to you, no? To change, to determine the course of history, okay? With what I've been calling narcissism, egocentrism, machismo. But the dark side of several of these personalities are incapacity, traumas, and addiction. The first addiction called addiction to power, okay? And derivative of that thing is addiction to several other policies and problems. Okay. Power is a drug. I mean, they have been developed this drug dependency trend. Okay. Then they have this, what I was talking about, the playbook of this type of leadership, of the art of the manipulator, we can talk, or the transgressor, is they are very good in information and disinformation mechanism and propaganda. This is a cue. I mean, this is cue. Important to understand this thing. They have used mediatic mechanisms to do this thing. X platform during Trump election is the best example that you can see about the use of media and the promotion of media and the use of private resources in order to, promote and polarize the electorate and to build up a political coalition, a winning political coalition using the media, okay? Then they use several strategies of rumor, disinformation, etc. Fake news, conflicting role of surveys. They came out with this survey and say, no, we're really winning. And no, people is not in favor of migration, it's against migration. Or this is going to happen to equality because people don't like equality, etc., etc. And the use of new instruments are important. No? The other part that is important of these type of mechanisms is there's no accountability for this. This is a black box where there's no transparency to really understand what is going on in this strategy, okay? Okay, so we have this personality on the one hand, and then we have a problem with the voter. I mean, how the voter is receiving this message and processing this message, and what type of reactions do we have from the voter, okay? 10 minutes, so we have to rush. Okay, I was talking about the change on the winning strategy that used to be winning and getting the nearest possible to the median voter. This goes in sociological studies from even the early 1940s to the built-up theory of the rational voter, okay? We no longer have use for this type of theories. We are putting more importance today in emotions and the different way that emotions, sentiments, and disinformation affect the voting calculus of the population, okay? So this is important to understand what is going on with the voter today. The second topic is this lesser importance of the strategy of the median voter. If I'm in the sector of the median voter where the majority of the voters are concentrated, I think we have a winning coalition, okay? Today, you don't win by getting into this place, but also by producing disaffection, apathy, abstentions, okay? Or polarizing in order to disenfranchise voters and put them outside the median voter rate. And then try to build up an electorate from the rest of the fragmented areas of this. The other topic that is important to understand today is that the majority of the population in the world, this is just an example of 23 that I had I had the statistic, is independent today. The voter is no longer really strongly affiliated with any political party or any political institution. Tends to be more independent and try to identify by topics, by policies, by agendas, or sometimes by personalities, okay? But they don't have this link systematic that we used to think about the strong party systems and partisan identity, okay? And with this lesser partisan identification, we have a systematic conflict and even crisis of political parties that in certain cases, like in Europe particularly, they have come to crisis of governments, okay? Like what happened in Spain, what happened in France, what happened partially in England has to do with these things, okay? Second, for the voter, okay? There is an issue, not only of the political crisis with the parties, but also reaction to bad government results, or even a bad reaction to good government performances. The best example of this can be economic policies in the United States during the Biden administration. Policies of recovery, I mean, economic recovery were very good, were very successful. Finally, they control inflation. Finally, they were able to put back the jobs that were lost before COVID-19. But what happened? The voter was not satisfied with the results. They still the voters still perceive that the personal economic situation was worse during the Biden administration than during the Trump administration. So even with good results, performance of the government is important, but it's more important the way the people evaluate the results of these policies. Okay, and when the evaluation is bad, you can see the consequences of this. They have consequences for campaign elections, and this all leads to voter dissatisfaction and alienation. And then, like next one, there is an issue that I'm just gonna pass through this thing because this is important to take into consideration. Several theories have talked that this alienation will lead into more abstentionist trends in the electorate, but what we can see during the 2024 administration, I mean, the 2024 elections in most of the world, participatory politics in all the countries increased by several points in each country. Right? There were more, I mean, the outcome of the electorate was bigger than we expected in several of the presidential or parliamentary governments in 2024. Okay, I'm gonna go fast to these resources. Money is one issue that is important today, but we have a black box about what is going on with money, both private and public in this sector. We don't really know how this type of leadership, this type of campaigns really finance their strategies, okay? The second topic, and this is the most important one that I've been talking, is the media. They have developed technologies of communication and production of truths. And this is important. 25 years ago, television and radio were decisive for any candidate. Today, a tweet of 70 words is more important than a television ad during 2 or 3 months about good or bad policies, okay? And this is a shift in information as well as the content of the information. So whoever can play that, it's more likely to win on this thing. All the social sorting, the polarization framing, and the social exposure goes through that topic. The old ways of doing politics in several countries, there was canvassing with the electorate in meetings, in topics, house through house, etc. It's not disappearing, but it's not the most important strategy today, okay? Media can be decisive. Okay. So how does they win? Just to summarize what we're talking, polarize and divide, okay? Electoral responses are divided along party line. So what we need to do is not going into the majority of the votes, but picking up the fragmentation that we have been producing by polarizing the vote, okay? Growing alignment of parties and candidates into positions that fall apart, no? So you don't win by getting the majority of the votes only, but also by catching up several of the small electorates. That's what Trump was very successful, and that's why he got so many, not only votes, but also electoral votes. I'll talk about at the end of talk about this. Okay, and then use selected and favorite topics that are clear to have polarization effects. Immigration, abortion, sexism, racism, economic policies, taxes, government intervention, foreign policy, religion. So use the topics that really make the people identify against some favor or in favor of that policy. And with this, build up a campaign that doesn't have really clarity and rationality, but built up identity, no? Misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, treason. Distributive politics sometimes is used to this thing, but also is used to polarize. And then build up alternative truths about every single thing that you can believe it's important. The climate change, immigration, the COVID-19. Okay. Okay. So by dividing the electorate and by posing something that contains different opinions in two different, completely different blocks, politicians from the far right or left wing gather those votes, and that's where they try to get their majority coalitions, okay? Usually, as I was telling you, you don't win by appealing to the median voter, but by pulling to the extremes, okay? And all the candidates have done that. Next. Okay, now, this is one of the major interpretations that we have is polarization. How do you win? By polarizing the electorate. We have seen that this discussion goes from the theory of the rational voter in the 1940s to partially the development of the median voter theory that was the most important consensus that we have for 40, 50 years even. And today we are rediscussing this idea of the median voter. But this is only one of the areas and one of the interpretations that we have today about what is happening is polarization. It's one of the topics. But the second and most important, there are two important things that we still have to explain. One thing that we need to explain is how does they win and what kind of strategies does they use, and try to explain the logics of this thing by several other theories. One theory that has been developed more recently, 25, 40 years maybe, is the game theory. That is one approach to try to understand, what type of game and strategies is being developed in politics in the world. And there is the last one, and this is really the classical one about how can you win in terms of socio-demographic trends, which I will put at the end. So I'm just gonna go fast to this one and then I'll close with the last one. Okay, so we have been through important democratic changes. We were asking whether some democracies survive while others will fall into autocracies, and how can we explain this issue? Democratic erosion happens when political leaders gain enough control over parties and other institutions to neutralize and restrain their force, but leave them intact enough to keep the opposition playing by the rules, okay? The rule of the game is to manipulate the rules, okay? This is one explanation. You have a constitution in your country that is strong in check and balances, so manipulate the constitution in order to develop or alter the forces of the different institutional powers, or erode the institutions. And that's one of the one of the basic strategies that a lot of these new rulers have developed. Erode the judiciary, like in India, like in Mexico, like in Argentina, like in the United States. Systematically criticize the results of what the judiciary is coming out as policies. Erode the belief of the rule of law and also the belief in the electoral institutions. The idea that, the 2020 election was fake and Democrats didn't win the election was important and instrumental in the role of the return of Donald Trump, okay? And by doing that thing, you don't have to produce a political coup, no? So you just have to backslide in several institutions, erode each one of the institutions. And then when you have each one of the institutions more or less eroded, you can put up a new political system more under your control. No? So this is the idea of the rules of the game become the game of the political in the political arena. No? It's not the institution; it's the way you manipulate the institution. There is a famous and then you have to prepare to develop this type of new strategy. There is a famous movie from the 1990s, precisely about political elections in the United States, just before, even before Trump and just after Reagan. That is, I mean, the title of the movie is Quack the Dog. What does this mean? And this is part of the idea. The idea is the dog is the animal that wags the tail, okay? It's okay. I mean, do you understand this idea? Okay, but what happened in politics? Okay, if the body of the body of the dog is the politics, when the politics are good, they are gonna wag the tail. Okay, so but if you wanna change the game, you have to make the dog not the dog wag the tail, but wag the dog. Is it use the tail to wag the dog, and this is the game changing strategy. Okay. If you cannot win by the rules and the institutions, you have to manipulate the rules and the institutions in order to produce an opportunity to win. Okay, this is the idea. Okay, so what we're looking is that there is a common pattern of erosion of the institutions that that all these transgressors have been following systematically. The first one is cultural, on issues that are today of importance. It's not that they were historical important, it's today is important. No? That we can, what we talk to be strong institutions like courts, political parties, and the media, and then block the possibility of the opponents and civil society try to control this. No? Take control of the parties too. This is one strategy that was decisive for Trump's victory, taking control of the Republican Party. No? Try to manipulate the Constitution. And this is a big, game that you can also see that happen in Indonesia a couple of months ago, no? So you can change the rules, and then you can change the age, and then when you change the age, you change the game, and then when you change the game, you can put another candidate, and when you put another candidate, then you have the judiciary in trouble. No? So this is the strategy, okay? Then autocrats purge courts and bureaucracies, which is the other topic. I say they try to appoint and put people and criticize courts that are independent, and then you can start looking at ways to control them, no? So this set of institutions and the style of politics become easier to recognize when you have everything put together in a game strategy, okay? Okay, this is just an explanation of more or less, according to this game theoretic proposal, what was happening and what is happening in the United States. No, why did Trump win? It's not only, this is the last one. He went by eroding all these institutions and all this and using these strengths, no? But the United States still has free press. The Republican voters are still for Trump, but they still think that the party is important. But they got into this game, and Trump won the party. Trump won the control of the party, control of the court, control of the media, and then he controlled the game of the electorate. No? Okay, and then for sure the other topic that is coming, and you will see with Trump, is all the sanctions, as the impeachment, as all these judgments, and all these pending judiciary, discussions, will be also controlled by this type of game, eroding the judiciary, creating an alternative truth, and then developing a different thing. And then the next one will be for sure the Constitution in the United States. Okay, so this is more or less a broad idea of what I was I've been trying to present to you. The first one is this idea of the polarization of the electorate with this new type of trends. The second one is this new game theoretical idea. But there's still another explanation that is claiming to come, and it's important not only for the United States, but for all the countries. One thing that is important for the US, but for all others, is that still there is an electoral explanation waiting for these democratic results. Trump won with the majority of the votes against 2020. He didn't get the majority of votes, but also won with the majority of the electoral college, okay? Which is the place where they decided who is going to be elected president. So he got, the number is wrong, it's 70.4 million votes against 71. So you see, the portion of the electorate that is in his favor is not so big, but was big enough to get a really big victory, okay? If you compare any other election in several places of the world, the situation is still the same. And behind the thing, it was a trend of increasing participation of the electorate. There were more votes in 2024 than in 2020 in the United States. There were many more votes in Mexico in 24 than in 2018 when this big leader, AMLO, was elected. And the anti-image of his leadership, Claudia, a woman, was elected with 35 million more votes than him. And it's also happened to Milei. The division, I mean, the difference between Milei and the left-wing politicians were almost 6 points only. So they win, and they win the majority of the electorate. But and this can be explained with what I was telling you. They don't go to the median voter, they go to the extremes. But still, we need to explain why does these extreme voters vote for these groups, okay? And this is an explanation that we need to develop, no? And because Trump not only, didn't have 73 million voters or partisan voters. He only had between 15 and 25 million partisan votes in his favor in all the surveys that we have developed. So there is 50 million votes that needed to be explained from independence, from polarization, from fragmentation, and from all of this. And the socioeconomic factors lie behind all these topics, okay? So what is the issue today? Is polarization the most important interpretation that we have to go through? Democratic backsliding, which is a consequence of what we are talking, or voter and game theory, the ones that really provide better explanation for these problems. Or finally, it's only an ideological synchronization, where you can see Trump and Milei running together as the new leaders of the world, together with other very funny leaders in our different countries in our world, okay? I will leave it with that to open for discussions and other talks. Okay.
Jawaban Prof Arturo itu kemungkinannya adalah dengan polarisasi di kalangan pemilih. Yang kedua adalah ini juga dikatakan di Indonesia, democratic backsliding itu berarti demokrasi itu mulai menurun. Dan yang ketiga adalah tadi teori voter teori dan atau game teori, dan terakhir apakah ada sinkronisasi ideologis. Walaupun Prof Arturo tidak menyebut nama beliau, kita semua di Indonesia mungkin kalau Trump diganti dengan Prabowo menarik. Saudara-saudari, ya. Pola umumnya udah kelihatan. I'm sorry. Why are they laughing? Because I said even though you don't mention his name, among all these ultra-right conservative leaders, Prabowo maybe can be changeable to Trump, basically. Jadi pertanyaannya bagi kita semua yang hadir di sini adalah sejauh mana hal-hal yang dikatakan Prof. Arturo itu juga berpengaruh dalam konteks pemilihan Presiden Indonesia yang baru saja kita lakukan di awal tahun ini dan Presiden dan Wakil Presiden sudah dilantik. Tadi beliau agak mengutip rubah aturan supaya ada orang tertentu bisa dipilih. Rubah hukum supaya ada pemimpin tertentu yang bisa dipilih. Nah, ini bagian dari tadi itu, democratic backsliding. Secara demokratis itu sebenarnya tidak etis. Nah, supaya tidak dituduh melanggar aturan, aturannya yang dirubah. Nah, itu Bapak Ibu. Selamat datang di era baru. Ya. Dan pertanyaan beliau tadi yang tidak kalah pentingnya, faktanya Trump terpilih secara aklamasi, landslide. Kalau bahasa Indonesianya mungkin bukan aklamasi, tapi secara mayoritas. Bedanya jauh dengan lawannya Kamala Harris. Sama juga di sini. Prabowo Gibran menang jauh lebih tinggi daripada dugaan para pengamat. Jadi harus ada pertanyaan yang mempertanyakan kok bisa bukan hanya menang, menangnya itu mayoritas sekali. Itu tadi pertanyaan yang disampaikan oleh Prof. Arturo tentang Trump, tapi itu juga berlaku pemimpin-pemimpin ultra konservatif termasuk di Indonesia ini. Kok bisa? Padahal pemilihnya dan menangnya itu yang mungkin perlu dijawab oleh kita bersama dalam diskusi kita siang hari ini. Dan terakhir ini mungkin hanya sebagai ilustrasi, ada salah satu artikel di luar negeri mengatakan ini pertanyaannya bukan kenapa Trump menang, kenapa Kamala Harris bisa kalah. Dan salahnya secara luar biasa. Salah satunya ini mohon maaf dikatakan itu karena para pemilih Amerika itu tidak terdidik dengan baik soal demokrasi. Nah, Amerika dan Indonesia kayaknya adalah berbeda. Jadi para pemilih baik di Amerika maupun di Indonesia itu bukan melihat soal demokrasi, bukan melihat soal KKN-nya, lebih apa nih yang paling aman dan nyaman buat saya. Itu kalau jawabannya itu ya mungkin bisa menjelaskan kenapa Trump bisa menang di Amerika, kenapa Prabowo bisa menang di Indonesia. Terlepas dari begitu banyak kritik dan kritiknya valid, saudara-saudari, kritiknya itu benar dan tepat, tapi tetap orang memilih. Karena pada akhirnya ada yang mengatakan yang Mas Fadli, yang penting kalau orang Jakarta bilang gue bisa makan, gue bisa minum tenang. Emang gue pikirin urusan demokrasi. Sedikit pengantar kita bisa banyak bertanya pada demokrasi. Silakan. Mungkin begitu ya, maaf ya, depan karena perlu zamannya.
Hello, Professor. First of all, my name is Ceci, and I'm majoring in sociology, and I'm in seventh semester. First of all, thank you so much for the lecture because I feel like it's really close to our issue right now. So my question is also regarding. So as we all know, our president, right, Mr. Prabowo Subianto was. Okay, sorry. So our official president right now, Mr. Prabowo Subianto, was an alleged for abduction and also human rights abuser, and also, allegedly killed the pro-democracy student activist in 1998. And however, during his campaign this year, um, he is famous for his signature move, or we call it here like joget. And so, resulting to that campaign, he got his nickname with Gamoy, or in English, it means cutie. So, it's very contrast to what he did in the past. Um, so yeah, the contrast of his past crimes and also his branding for the campaign is truly ironic for me. Um, but aside from that, he also gained many voters from it and especially won the election. So also a lot of people here in Indonesia are making fun of the past tragedy in 1998 because they didn't experience the new order because the majority of the voters are my age, the young people. So the question is, how much does historical experience can influence how society responds to democracy? And thinking about the concept of game theory, where in this year's election, they also changed the law for the age for entering the presidency. I want to ask, how can social movement be effective in this kind of situation where they can, just change the law for some people to get it into the yeah, the representative. Thank you.
Similar question, but okay. Uh, there are two issues that are important to understand. There is no electoral memory, okay? And that's the problem. That's the first one. And if there is electoral memory, you can change the narrative, which is the second playbook idea. Okay, if your narrative is not working and you are losing, change your narrative. Produce an alternative truth. So then you can go from a military dictatorship into the grandfather of the Indonesians. For instance, for one example, I don't want to go into local politics, but this you have, I mean, you can see this happening in several other places of the world too. All bad candidates that never got, I mean, enough votes, suddenly they become, I mean, they become keen to the electorate, but the electorate doesn't remember. I mean, can you remember who was the contender of Jokowi in the last election? You remember that, but not, I don't know who I mean, if we put it for both, I'm sure not even the half of the present people in this room will remember who was the contender against Jokowi. So there's no memory on that. Huh? So this is important. Second, when I'm talking about change the narrative, is this idea. You can win with what you were doing, change what you were doing. And this is this idea of going to the playbook. Change the partisan coalition, produce polarization among voters, affective, ideological, by topics, and then develop the new narrative and try to sell it. And if you can cover that thing with enough propaganda that will cover up crimes from the past, that will work. Okay. That happened in Brazil, for instance, with and might happen with Bolsonaro again. Okay. That's, I mean, the danger is still there present. Why? Because what I'm trying to explain with this thing is that, I mean, there's the new rules of the game. By manipulating the rule of the game, you can also win. If the institutions are not working for you, try to change the way the institution works. Okay. Then there are several other topics that are important. I mean, there's a shift. I mean, strong democratic shift of Indonesia from the late 90s to today. No, I don't know. I would say that the majority of the electorate in Indonesia today has less than 18 years old. Or, I mean, it's between 18 and 40 years old. So most of the electorate that participated this year was not even born when the last election where Prabowo was candidate, they were born. So that's one issue that's important to understand. If that happened 3 years ago, I don't know. Other example that I have that is really good is López Obrador. López Obrador was a contender for presidential elections since 2006. 2006 almost won and produced a major division in the country. It was a contested election that were never clear who won. In 2012, the political coalition politically killed López Obrador. He didn't get enough votes. And then in 2018, he won by a strong majority of votes. I mean, is this one of not only new politician, is this old politician that builds up and changes his narrative in order to win or to produce a winning coalition. And if you compare López Obrador in 2006, he was already using fake news and polarization as his main strategy. But in 2018, he understood that he also had to combine partisan coalitions with a new strategy, with polarization on certain topics, and also he did some different use of the fragmented portions of what's left on the political crisis in Mexico. So he won big. But he also, won in the middle of a strong polarization situation. So this is possible, what I'm saying. So the explanation lies a little bit more or less in the idea of manipulating the democratic game. No? Okay.
Check, check. Okay, is my sound already audible, right? Okay, first of all, thank you, Prof, for the lecture. My name is Marcus from the Sociology of Religion class. So I will frame my question according to Sociology of Religion concept and about your presentation about the identity and the polarization. So before I ask the question, I might give some context about Indonesian politics. So in political campaign, we often see candidates use buzzwords to indicate they are the savior and force revolution, as what you've said in the presentation. For instance, after elected as the governor of Jakarta, Mr. Anies Baswedan said, dulu pribumi ditindas, saatnya kita jadi tuan rumah di negeri sendiri, which show his statement that frame him as a hero. And most people interpret this statement as a statement of superiority where the minority is their oppressors. On the other hand, in his political campaign, he initiated polarization using the word good and bad with Islamic identities referring to the good side. So based on those cases, I would like to ask several questions with political actors and religion as the focus. So if we're talking about political actors are not limited to political candidates, but also civil organizations as they have powers in our democracy. Therefore, what can civil organizations do to prevent this kind of polarization in hope to prevent an escalation to a bigger conflict? And the second is about grassroots politics. Grassroots politics are the target of the exploitation that I've mentioned before of religious identity in Indonesia, as they are still close to their religious roots and they tend to reject modernity. Are there any ways they can face this issue and be an independent political actors? So independent political actors mean they can criticize the political candidates and not follow them blindly based on their religious identity. And they don't become puppet of the elites, but an independent political actors. As about Indonesian political grassroots, they tend to neglect political things because they focus on their peace and duties. Thank you.
Well, I have no idea about this type of identity politics in Indonesia. I've seen some others, and okay. Uh, there are two issues. What can civil society and organizations do to try to stop this? But before I answer this part, I want to go to the role of religion in politics, which varies a lot according to countries. Okay. But just look at what happened with Trump, just to give you an example. Trump coalition is not only a Republican coalition, it's a coalition of the most extreme right-wing Christian groups in the United States. People that believe that if you don't vote for Trump, the Holocaust is going to come. Okay? People that believe that Harry is the real evil. Well, so that's how polarized religious identities were in the United States. And then you can go from that to abortion, to immigration, and to several topics. So, but the basis of this part of the coalition was religion. Mark Rubio, which is going to be the Secretary of State, is one of these leaders that is very strongly linked to one of these religious groups. So politics in the United States has been during the last, I would say since after Reagan, has been strongly contaminated with religious issues. And that's a systematic construction of this religion, politics, and identities in the United States that has built this power. Brazil is also another country where religion plays a very interesting role in politics today. You can see religious leaders as religious politicians, political leaders, governors, senators, leaders of political parties from political coalitions. So, and this game, to the point in Brazil that sociologists and political scientists today say that Brazil is governed today by three types of groups: the Bible, what they call the cattle coalition, which is the major groups of rural cattlemen, okay, and then what they call the gun coalition. So they got up to the point that they consider religion one of the political constitutions of the country today. Okay, so how do you prevent it? On the one hand, inside the political arena, political parties are systematically trying to broaden up coalitions against these ultra-religious groups. And this is one topic that works in several places, does not really work that much in others, but it's important to understand this. United States is one battleground that is really interested in that. Okay. Brazil has fought this thing before. They were successful before during the first Lula administration. Then Bolsonaro revolved everything, and now they are discussing what is going to happen in their country after this. But on the political side, political parties are the ones that had to really discuss the political interest in the long run of having strong religious coalition within their parties, okay? On the side of the civil society organizations, okay, one of the topics that you had to discuss, and I didn't have the time to go into this thing, there have been some examples in several places of the world on how to stop this type of mobilization, okay? Not only human rights coalitions or I mean, for instance, the role of in the United States with the triumph of Trump, in spite of the Trump victory, in several states, there was a majority vote that passed at the constitutional level in order to allow for abortion measures in the United States. Of the 14 states that voted this topic, 10 passed, 10 changed the restrictions they have for abortion. How does they win that? By political coalitions from civil society movements, local politicians, and several other organizations. So this is possible to do that thing. But this was a very particular type of civil society organization from grassroots, women organization, public health officials, doctors, professionals, lawyers. That was a very broad and complex coalition that can be developed in that. No? Now, can you really go into change the narrative of religious politics in certain countries? You just look at what is happening in India, not over here. Look what is happening. I mean, the shift that Modi is trying to do, no, against Muslims, for instance, is one of the issues that even with his power, he has not been able to win this thing, but the result is a very violent conflict. No? So you have the danger of getting engaged into these really violent confrontations in your country when you try to shift these things. Unless you are some sort of a very authoritarian government like in China that can really produce some changes. No? So this is really a difficult issue. I mean, particularly in societies where religious groups have strong power, strong social, economic, and political influence, you have to really play by the book inside those political coalitions, not outside. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, that answered.
Thank you. I hope he answers your question, right? Okay. Like a comparative perspective. Yes, thank you. Any other question? Yes, please.
Yes. Hello, Professor Arturo. Thank you for the lecture. It was very eye-opening. My name is Shahira Hairnisa, Shahi from Conflict and Conflict Resolution class. I have two questions today. The first question kind of touched on what Ceci's asked before, but I'm gonna see it from a different perspective. So Ceci kind of touched about how the 1998 case, while in Indonesia, Prabowo winning the election while he is publicly involved in a serious human rights violation case. And when we are talking about America, just like you said before, Trump is the first president that are elected as a convicted felon. And maybe just like my friend said before, he also touched on another case while in Philippines, Marcos winning the election while he is children of a well-known dictator. So the first question that I want to ask you is, is there any shift on how people view their leaders, or do people no longer care about this kind of identity about their future leader? Because in both cases, just like Professor Ari also said before, both Trump and Prabowo win the election in a very big gap in a landslide manner. So that's my first question. And then the second question I want to ask is, on war in Gaza, many American, most of them have been disappointed by how the Biden administration tackling the war and the failure of the ceasefire after the negotiation over and over again. So right now, even though Trump has a clear favoritism toward Israel, many people still choose Trump and not choose Harris. Even I just read it before in Michigan, one of the biggest Arab American community, Trump win by a landslide in that community as well. So my question is there gonna be a buyer's remorse after this result? And what do you think the future will hold for Gaza's conflict in terms of Trump winning the election? Thank you.
Well, I mean, for the last part of the the question about Harris and Trump on the issue on Gaza. Okay. Yes, Trump won that section, but be careful about just making this ecological fallacy of Trump won this part is because all the people that is against the policies of the United States and Israel voted against. Okay, that was not the case. Actually, Harris also got a lot of that votes, but were not enough to win. That's the point. Okay, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, the difference between 73 and 71 million is 2 million voters. Okay, he got the majority of votes this time, but look at the polarization that he produced. The point is that he was very, I mean, Trump changed not his narrative, but the strategy of campaigning after Biden got out of the competition. He has to change it because Harris was doing canvassing in those particular places where nobody knew who was going to win, where the elections were at us. And Trump went to those places and he shifted into his speeches. It's not that he's in favor of those policies. Don't believe what the politicians say. Just observe what the politicians do. That's the rule. He said he was going to fix the problem. He didn't say he was going to help Gazans. Never. He said he was sorry about the mess that the United States administration was producing in those places, criticizing Harris for that, but not saying, I'm going to do something for you. And then the people decided to go for him because they weren't satisfied with Harris, not because they were satisfied with Trump. As with several other minorities, okay, that you wouldn't think they would vote for Trump, but they decided to go for Trump in small portion of the vote. So the point is, yes, for the case of the United States, for the case of the conflict and the war today in Gaza, some people decided to vote for Trump because they were unsatisfied with Harris and Biden administration, definitely. And we knew that since January. And one of the critics of Biden at that moment was precisely that. He was giving too much leeway to Israel since the beginning of the conflict, and he never stopped supporting not only Israel, but also the policies that the prime minister was doing. He was not strong in stopping those policies. Harris neither was strong on that thing, and he lost that narrative, definitely. Okay? But Trump is playing a big game and a dangerous game with not only with Israel, but with the US and the use in the United States, which is another issue. Okay? You can see that population and that electorate is moving in a very different way from what Trump and Harris were doing. Okay, this is the first part of the question, or the second part of the question. No? Okay, the first one is about, do people care about the past behavior of politicians? Usually, yes, but there is a timing in the framework of electoral processes. For sure, when you are evaluating, when you are voting from one candidate against another, you are evaluating the past behavior of the current government or administration. Maybe even one big leader, maybe one big political party, some political party, but you're not evaluating the long-term development of those policies. Otherwise, there won't be a possibility of political shift and political changes and transitions between one party and another. You always try to measure in the, there is a short-term evaluation. And that's one of the problems. If you go not only to these recent elections and the case, for instance, of World War, go to Europe, post-war Europe, go to the new political coalitions in Germany, in France, in several different regions of Europe. The resurgence of the neo-Nazi, what they call neo-Nazi political parties and coalitions, is big enough that they have been producing small political coalitions that are winning local elections today. And you can say, well, how can you explain this thing? Nobody does they really forgot what happened during the Hitler administration? Maybe they forgot. Maybe they don't care anymore, because the memory and what has happened after that and the new narratives has shifted the belief that this Holocaust was so bad. Okay, so people vote, but several times they don't even remember what happened during the last war, civil war in their countries. Okay, and that is a problem that even institutions have a hard time trying to preserve this type of memories and traditions. No? And you can manipulate the truth, which is the other big thing that I've been talking. Even if the president is a felon, the majority of Trumpian population or Trumpian voters, they believe he's not a felon. It's the judiciary that is not running well. So it's an alternative. So we believe that he's a felon, yes, but several people that vote for him say no. The problem is the judiciary. And when you put that into the stand and to put people to vote, then that narrative matters. And that's the point that is important for elections. I don't know if that explains this idea. Okay.
Any more question, please? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Ganda Upaya. I'm former lecturer in Department of Sociology, University of Indonesia. But I think it's difficult to compare Trump now with Prabowo, because American has two-party system. Indonesia has multi-party system. And second, this is the second term for Trump to win. And this is the first what Prabowo was presidency. Yeah. So when Trump won in 2016, yeah, two professors of Harvard, Daniel Ziblatt and Stephen Levitsky, launched a book, How Democracies Die, yeah, to criticize Trump. But, yeah, since I've graduated also from United States of America, it is not about Trump's win, but it is about Hillary's Clinton failure, about Democrat failure. It is same also for Biden, because it is about his son, the scandal conducted by his son. So, but for me, it is interesting to know, since you're from Mexico, about Partido Revolucionario Institucional, yeah, who rules Mexico with one-party system, because Indonesia also what imitate one-party system from Mexico in Indonesia New Order. So now the problem in Mexico, also in Indonesia, it is about the transition from one-party rule to multi-party system. So it is about the transition. Prabowo founded what? A political party. That's the problem for us. Maybe you can compare the transition in Mexico from one-party rules to multi-party system now, even though Partido Revolucionario Institucional failed. Yeah. Golkar also failed. Yeah. Golkar also failed in Indonesia. Yeah. Golkar never won any longer. But Golkar always what in the government. That's the problem in Indonesia. Yeah. So what's the problem in Mexico? Maybe because it's, I think it's too fast to compare what so many states. And maybe what about, and the last question is about Ortega in Nicaragua. Okay, Daniel Ortega. Why Ortega still rule Nicaragua? Thank you.
So you have several questions in the same. Why Ortega still rules in Nicaragua? Because no leader in the region has been able to build a coalition to oust him. There are several groups that support Ortega: Mexico, Venezuela, formerly Argentina, partially Brazil, and other groups from those. Okay, so, and on the other side, you have the OEA, the Organization of American States Coalition, more keen to the United States trying to oust him, but they haven't been able to produce a result on that topic. And Ortega is not longer a democracy. It's an autocracy that has gone really, really bad. But there is no single international institution that really wants to take the responsibility of ousting him and really put him into International Court of Justice, which is where he should be. Okay, this is the first one. The second one on the transition, yeah, you're right on the difference of the political parties and party systems. And I'm not taking into consideration that. I mean, what I was trying to point is that parties are still important, but in some cases, parties have thrived with this thing, and in other cases have been totally destroyed. One single case is the case of Mexico. The Revolutionary Institutional Party was strong until the mid-90s. Then systematically was eroded. Then there was a political coalition from the right. There was a winning coalition from 2000 to 2018, or maybe 2012. That was a very right-wing coalition. But then the left had several experiments until Morena, the new political party of López Obrador, was built in 2015 in the middle of a general political crisis of the parties, fragmentation, ideologies that were not working, politicians that were not developing good governments or providing good results for the population. Or, I mean, scandals and corruption, general scandals and corruption from all political leaders and governors that produced partially a political crisis that López Obrador was able to build up his new coalition. And during his government, he's been trying to rebuild a new political party that is similar to the old PRI. Actually, he has the majority of the Congress, and today they are promoting the shift in the constitution in order to vote judges. I mean, he's trying to rebuild behind the scenes a strong one single political party in the country. Whether he's going to succeed or not, on the short term, he has the power. Let's see how long that power holds. Okay, that's the first one. Second, yes, there is a big difference between that thing between the two political systems in these countries, as well as in Argentina, as well as in Brazil, which is a more a multi-party system. But the point is, and you are right on that, the point is we have to look at the changing role of political parties today. What Trump did, and that was one of his long-term strategies, he tried to win the control of the Republican Party. Even the bigger, more powerful politicians within the Republican Party, and what we call the elite, the status of the Republican Party are against Trump, they were completely dominated by the new Trump coalition. And they are not really able to manage that much of political power now today because of Trump, because Trump took the control of that. And that was a key issue. That's what I'm trying to put on. The key issue is control certain portions of the party system in order to produce this mobilization of the electorate, okay? Now, and then you make a comment on what Levinsky and other colleagues, I mean, Jaworski, all this. I mean, I remember them screaming in congresses that Trump will never be elected, that was not a possible thing. And we were screaming again and they say, well, you know, we need a better explanation for this because this guy is winning and he finally won. One for the first time, one for the second time. And the big explanation that is still there is why the people in the United States decided to vote for him again. Not only for this strategy, not only for ideology. I don't think all the people that voted for Trump are so bad as we think Trump is, okay? But they were dissatisfied and disenfranchised with the Democratic Party, as you were talking. Harris was not the best candidate that you could get from the Democratic Party. And Biden was a loss, a total loss. So that, I mean, after the first debate, that election was lost by the Democratic Party and the Democratic sector. They tried to shift it, it didn't work. With Hillary, there are several other issues that can really be put in this thing. But then again, we still need an explanation. Why does the democratic system and people that believe in democratic values still vote for these candidates? And this is the bottom line of this thing. And I don't think political science in the United States has an explanation yet. That's what I'm trying to put. The game strategy said something about that thing, but still, we need an explanation. Are we really in a shift of the democratic political system into autocracies? The fact that they voted for Trump and they elected this transgress by all means that the country is going into an autocracy? That's a question that needs explanations, no? And for sure, not only for the case of the United States, but also for Mexico. Is Claudia Sheinbaum an autocrat? When she got a strong majority of the vote, she has the majority of the Congress on her control. That was a popular vote. And a lot of the people like their policies, but other group does not like her policies. So what is this? It's a polarization. It's hegemony. I mean, we had to rethink about these discussions. No? I will leave it like that, because I don't know anything about it. I just want to make a point on the role of religious parties in several places. When you have a religious party, strong religious parties, or strong religion that is based not only in society but in the politics, and then the structure of the political arena and the political parties has strong religious issues. And then you have finance. I mean, you finance the political system and the religious system through the government. Then you have a mix of issues and interests that runs in the political system. In some cases, like in Germany, which is a country that also supports both religious groups and political parties, the policy results are a little bit different, okay? But in other places, the policy, like in Brazil that I've been looking, the policy results can be, abysmally crazy. No? Some states are voting not only against abortion, but they are voting for, first putting the constitution that the first and most important issues, God and salvation on all these topics. So they can be going into different areas with the financial of the state. Anyway, we can discuss that thing further.
Thank you so much, Prof. Arturo. Too bad it's already 4 p.m. So we have to end this discussion now. Terima kasih banyak untuk semua, termasuk para dosen, Mas Ganda, ya, Mas Sakti, Mas Imam, Mas Fajri, untuk kehadirannya, dan tentu semua tadi penanya-penanya yang sudah bertanya sangat signifikan, ya. Mungkin terakhir saya tidak akan menyimpulkan apa-apa, tapi yang menjadi persoalan kalau tadi Prof. Arturo menekankan kok bisa Trump menang lagi. Mungkin pertanyaannya kok bisa Prabowo akhirnya menang setelah 3 kali gagal. Itu beberapa pertanyaan terlepas dari yang dikatakan oleh Mas Ganda tadi. Sistem partai politiknya beda. Nah, mungkin pertanyaan selanjutnya, apakah partai politik sekarang berpengaruh? Ini sekedar pertanyaan yang tidak perlu dijawab sekarang, tapi terima kasih sekali lagi Prof. Arturo, Ibu, dan saudara-saudari semua. Mungkin sebelum kita bubar, saya minta tolong Mas Fajri, bisa tidak foto bersama tapi fotonya ke sana. Jadi semuanya kelihatan. Terima kasih. Kenang-kenangan untuk Prof. Arturo dan Bu Yati. Ini pakai foto ini. You know,
Sri, pastikan yang di Zoom kena foto ya, Sri.
I like to eat apples and bananas.